advertising man, not a red herring. I've got a job, a secretary, a mother, 2 ex-wives, and several bartenders dependent upon me. And I don't intend to disappoint them all by getting myself slightly killed.
Cary Grant becomes a secret agent against his will. Propelled at gunpoint onto the highest level of international intrigue and framed for the perfect setup for suspense. With the perfect woman and the perfect crime, as Alfred Hitchcock takes you north by northwest.
Alfred Hitchcock is regarded as one of the greatest film directors of all time. His genius was tapping into the most basic of human emotions, fear. However, the way he created fear in his films was far more cunning than merely depicting scenes of extreme violence. Hitchcock put us in touch with how we could become the unwitting victims of secrets, betrayal, and even government plots in the midst of our everyday lives. He employed this premise in many of his best pictures. However, North by Northwest stands out as the ultimate Hitchcock thriller. I'm Eva Marie Saint, and this is the story of how this film was made and the master who brought it to the screen. From the late 1920s, Alfred Hitchcock plied his trade in the motion picture business, and as told by his daughter, Pat Hitchcock, it was a family business.
My mother and father first met. She had been in the motion picture business since she was 16, and she was working as an editor, a cutter. But in the days when you put one reel here, it went through a little sort of viewing thing, and then another reel over there. And it ruined her eyes, I might say. And this young man came in, and what he was there for was drawing the pictures for the subtitles. You know, and the sun sets, and he would draw the sun setting. And that's where they met. And he never spoke to her because she had a much better job than he did. And in those days, you didn't do that. And then eventually she became an editor on a picture he was going to be assistant director on. So then that was all right. He could talk to her. Actually, it was very soon after he met her that he became a director. Then she worked with him on all of his pictures.
After many successes in the 1940s and early 50s, Alfred Hitchcock was contracted by MGM to create a film adaptation of the celebrated novel, The Wreck of the Mary Dear. So Hitch had the studio hire Ernest Lehman, fresh from his triumph with the sweet smell of success, to write the screenplay. However, the Mary Dear was never to set sail for Hitchcock and Lehman.
I walked in one day and said, Hitch, I give up. You've got to get yourself a new writer. I don't know how to do this picture. And he said, don't be silly. We get along so well together, we'll just do something else. So I said, well, what'll we tell MGM? He said, we won't tell them. One day, Hitch said to me, I always wanted to do a chase across the faces of Mount Rushmore. I said, I like that. And I made some little notes on that. And then one day, Hitch said, I always wanted to do a scene where somebody is addressing the United Nations and says, I refuse to continue until the delegate from Peru wakes up. So an usher goes over and taps a delegate from Peru, and he falls over. He's dead. And I sat in my office trying to construct a story which began at the United Nations. And that was the genesis. I said, I want to make the Hitchcock picture to end all Hitchcock pictures. Something that has wit, sophistication, glamour, action, and lots of changes of locale. And that's when I started writing. I created the first 65 pages of the screenplay, sent them off to Hitch, and I have a beautiful 4-page handwritten letter from Hitchcock, which is in my scrapbook, telling me how much he liked the first 65 pages. It's priceless. So he went to the powers that be at MGM and spun about 20% of a movie, because that's about all we had. He looked at his wristwatch and said, well, gentlemen, I have a meeting now, and I'll see you at the preview. And they were thrilled. They felt they were going to get 2 Hitchcock pictures instead of just 1. That was typical of him.
With a schedule that required shooting in 3 major locations, including Mount Rushmore, it was becoming clear to MGM that North by Northwest was going to be a very large and expensive production. The original cost estimates came in at a little over $3 million, which could be the cost of a Star's trailer today. So Hitchcock brought a tried and true creative team to the film, including art director Bob Boyle.
The reason we had storyboards and why it was all pre-planned is it not only was easier for him, but he had already been able to communicate with all the other disciplines involved. Hitchcock had the big office at the end of the hall. Next to him was Ernie Lehman, the writer. I had the office next to Ernie. Bob Burks, the cameraman, had an office next to me. George Tomasini, the editor, everybody was on.
He'd have a finished script. He would then take a pad with 3 rectangles on. He would then draw every single shot in the picture. He would then go over it with the cameraman. So by the time he got on the set, he knew exactly what that movie was going to look like up on the screen.
To him, the exciting part was thinking about it, was sitting behind his desk and thinking about a sequence.
From the beginning, Hitchcock and Lehman had Jimmy Stewart in mind for the role of Roger Thornhill. But at some point, it was suggested that the project might be a better vehicle for Cary Grant. However, the casting of his leading lady was a challenge.
I'm a party girl. I'm a party girl.
I'm a party girl. I go out with men for money.
MGM suggested their contract player Sid Charisse to play Eve Kendall, but Hitchcock didn't think she was quite right for the part and suggested me. I had just starred in Raintree County for MGM, who thought I was wrong for the role of the sexy double agent. Regardless, Hitchcock insisted, and I was hired.
He could see something in people that other people couldn't see. You know, he could see the classiness. He could see her as a person, you know, instead of the parts she'd been playing.
He secretly admired beautiful women, quite obviously, particularly if they looked like Grace Kelly or Eva Marie Saint. His eyes always gave him away. His eyes always followed beautiful women.
Blondes are more mysterious. What is she like? Is she cool? Is she sexy? That's what you're not sure of. It was all tied in with the mystery.
Hitchcock cast James Mason for the role of Van Damme.
And then finally, Marty Landau was on the roster.
Hitchcock saw me in a play that brought me to California called Middle of the Night, which I had done on Broadway with Edward G. Robinson. And then I got a call from him, you know, for a picture called North by Northwest.
He did use the same people, same character actors. Look at Leo G. Carroll. He was in practically every Hitchcock picture.
In the role of Roger's mother, Mrs. Thornhill, Hitchcock cast Jessie Royce Landis, although only a year older than Cary Grant. Other notable casting included the heavies, Adam Williams, Robert Ellenstein, and veteran character actress Nora Marlowe. When I got the role, I had just given birth to my daughter, Lorette Hayden, so after I lost a few pounds, Hitch began the process of transforming me into Eve Kendall. He personally oversaw all of the details of Bill Tuttle's glamorous makeup designs and the sophisticated hairstyles of Sidney Gilleroff. But he wasn't so crazy about MGM's costumes for me. The studio had designed an entire wardrobe for my character, but Hitchcock didn't like it and threw out almost everything. Then he took me to Berghoff Goodman in New York, and we selected the rest of my wardrobe right off the models. I often joked that he was my one and only sugar daddy.
I had absolutely nothing for the final act of the picture. I found myself in the second week of not having written a single page. I said, Hitch, we're in trouble. He said, I'll be right down. I didn't know why we're in Mount Rushmore. And I told him my dilemma. I suddenly heard myself saying, she takes a gun out of a person, shoots him. Where did that come from? The right brain. The right brain keeps working all the time.
And so after a thorough pre-production period, we headed to New York for the start of principal photography. And ironically, the first day of shooting required Alfred Hitchcock to commit an actual crime. The script required Roger Thornhill to walk in the front entrance of the United Nations.
He wasn't allowed to shoot in the United Nations. And Cary Grant is seen entering the building. So Hitch secretly filmed it from across the street.
Oh, he's been walking across this lobby for years. I don't need to tell him how.
Well, Hitch took me to dinner, and he suddenly got very serious. He said, Ernie, you know, we're not making a movie. We're constructing an organ, the kind of organ that you see in a theater. And we press this chord, and now the audience laughs. And we press that chord, and they gasp. And we press these notes, and they chuckle. And he said, someday we won't have to make the movie. We'll just attach them to electrodes and play the various emotions for them to experience in the theater.
Next, the exterior of the Glen Cove, Long Island estate was shot.
This house had fantastic grounds with a long driveway up from the main road to the house. Fitted us perfectly.
Outside of being one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, Cary Grant was a successful businessman in his own right.
He charged 15 cents for an autograph. I was very impressed at one time because I thought, oh, isn't that nice? He's giving it all to charity. But I don't think he was giving it to charity at all. I think he was giving it to him.
He was very clever at that. He would always have someplace to go just before the check arrived.
Soon after, the company shot the scenes at Grand Central Station. One thing I'll never forget was Hitchcock always wore a suit and tie on the set. He was the very picture of button-down respectability, which was another way he inspired confidence in those working around him. After concluding the New York location, we headed out by train in a northwesterly direction to Chicago, where we began shooting my first scene for the film, the train exterior in a romantic thriller directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Believe me, it wasn't all bad. I loved playing Eve because it was so different from On the Waterfront or anything else I'd ever done before. Hitch said, "You don't have to cry in this one, Eva Marie. No more sink parts for you," meaning the dowdy wife at the kitchen sink. Cary thought I should play nothing but glamorous leading ladies for the rest of my career, but I wanted to do it all, the real and the unreal, and I pretty much have. As a director, Hitch was mostly concerned with the technical aspects of getting his vision onto the screen. Your hand goes here, you're looking up there. He wasn't like Kazan, who would whisper wonderful, intimate direction in your ear. Hitch gave me 3 basic pieces of direction. First, lower your voice. Second, don't use your hands. And third, always look directly into Cary's eyes. One of his greatest gifts as a director was that he made you feel you were the only perfect person for the role, and this gave you incredible confidence in playing the part. And then he'd leave you to your own devices. It was really a wonderful set to work on.
Hitch shut down the picture for a whole day because he couldn't figure out something I had written for which there was no explanation. There's a raking shot in the LaSalle Street station of phone booths. In one of them is Leonard, and the camera slowly dollies over to another phone booth, and there's Eve on the other phone, and he's obviously giving her instructions. It suddenly dawned on him, until somehow or other he came up with an answer that satisfied him, and he continued shooting.
Then Hitch filmed the scene where Cary Grant stalks me outside the Ambassador Hotel.
Hitch was rather apprehensive. He was very reclusive. He was afraid of the police.
When he was a boy, he did something naughty, not anything special, but his father had the local constable put him in jail, and he says that was why he was afraid of police.
Paranoia is a good word to use with Hitch.
At the Chicago airport location, Hitchcock was in fine fettle and agreed to take some amusing publicity shots.
He loved the limelight in being able to publicize his pictures and being able to talk about his work. But then when it came to his personal life, he shunned it completely.
He loved playing the British film icon, and if he had a dark side, he had a great sense of humor about it. Then we continued northwest again to Rapid City, South Dakota, where Cary and I had a night on the town in our country best. Before shooting began, the cast posed for some publicity stills in front of the Rushmore Monument. We had a good time that day, trying on our Native American headdresses. Of course, we were promised one of our own headdresses by MGM, but naturally we never got one. We were all having so much fun that what came next was a complete surprise. Somehow, word had gotten out about the planned chase across Mount Rushmore, and suddenly we were in the middle of a national controversy.
The proper government agency found out that we were planning to stage killings on the faces of a national monument.
The Department of Interior wasn't giving us permission.
Hitch and Cary had worked on a number of projects prior to North by Northwest, and while they had a lot of respect for each other's opinions, there were a few minor wrinkles between them.
There was something between them that wasn't always quite right.
Because if you're doing a Hitchcock picture and you're Cary Grant, I think you're not going to be the total center of all attention.
Well, when he was in charge and when he was the director and Cary was the actor, then everything worked out fine.
Then the company headed out to shoot the famous crop duster scene in East Bakersfield, California. To begin with, the crew filmed the aerial establishing shot where Cary is dropped off by a bus.
Way off in the distance, you could see a town. So that became a matte shot. I said, I've never handled a matte shot from a crane. It would be unsteady. Well, what we did is we took 4 cables and we tied it off 4 ways and then lifted the crane just a little so that everything was tight, and it worked.
Nothing happens for almost 8 minutes, and it still holds your attention.
Even though it was early October, the climate was that of a sweltering desert. This was probably one of the only times Hitch ever wore short sleeves on the set. For 3 days, poor Cary ran like crazy with a stunt plane swooping down at him, or so it would seem, as nobody would think of putting Cary Grant in the position of getting decapitated by a low-flying plane. Some trick photography was used. I feel like a traitor telling you this, but first the crew shot a swooping plane from a ditch, and then later, Cary was shot on a soundstage jumping into a fake ditch with the plane footage on a process screen behind him. Carrie and I were relaxed. We chatted between takes and even did the latest dance craze, a far cry from the anxiety on screen. I had a bike on the lot, and one day, while I was out on a ride during my lunch break, someone took a picture and later left it in my dressing room with this fake traffic ticket. The MGM studio police had cited me for driving 60 miles an hour on the wrong side of the road in night garments. Other offenses included drunk driving, foul language, and failure to pass a sobriety test.
When we were doing the auction scene, he whispered something to Carrie, he whispered something to James, he whispered something to Eva Marie, and he passed me by. And I walked up to him, I said, is there anything you want to tell me? I was a young actor, eager, you know. I mean, they're getting direction. He said, Martin, I'll only tell you if I don't like what you're doing. You're projecting very well. And I said, well, okay, that's nice, but I did feel left out. Hitchcock said actors are cattle. Well, he never said that. He said you must treat actors like cattle.
Along the way, we had a few visitors on the set of North by Northwest, including Hitchcock Fine, Shirley MacLaine, actress Miyoshi Umeki, and Pat Hitchcock, who was expecting her third child. An Egyptian producer and his leading lady made a visit along with my husband, Jeff Hayden, and finally, Princess Sofia of Greece. Then Saul Siegel and the MGM brass came to visit the soundstage. Whether or not Hitchcock feared authority, here he's smiling that reassure the money man smile that never goes out of date. One of the most noticeable mistakes that happens in the movie occurs when I fake Around this time, the budget greenlit by MGM at $3 million was ballooning by the day. For example, Cary Grant's contract stipulated a specific amount of time for his services. And when the film went over schedule, the studio paid him an astronomical $5,000 a day. I should know because I went over schedule too, at $2,000 a day. For the reunion scene in the forest, Cary and I were shot on an MGM soundstage with a few rows of pine trees between us. This is one of Eve Kendall's best scenes.
Maybe it was the first time anyone ever asked me to do anything worthwhile.
The head of the studio felt the scene was too long, and Hitch would not cut a frame from it. So I think that was the only point at which he and the studio disagreed.
Then at last, we shot on the gigantic Mount Rushmore sets at MGM. And here, Bob Boyle and his crew achieved some of the greatest art direction ever shot on film. For 5 days, Cary and I climbed on ledges and peaks sculptured in concrete in front of the enormous backdrop of Mount Rushmore, stretching 30 feet high and 150 feet wide.
I think it was one of the finest scenic paintings probably ever made, because very often with a scenic painting, you put trees in front or you put a little scrim over it, but we couldn't do that here.
The set was largely a very safe place, but once I hung from a cliff that appeared to be miles high, but was only a few yards from a scaffold below. I was saved by Cary from a ledge that appeared to be a sheer drop straight down. Actually, it was on a 45-degree angle, and I couldn't have fallen if I wanted to. It looks dangerous, but really, it was just a lot of fun.
I think if you read the script, you'll see the train goes off. I didn't write the tunnel.
The obvious parallel to the sexual act always gets a laugh. It may be that the trains had some sexual feelings for him.
There's no way I can take credit for that. Damn it.
After 78 days in front of the cameras, North by Northwest finished shooting on December 16, 1958. And even though it was more than $1 million over budget, MGM was delighted with the results. Not long after, the film was scored by Bernard Herrmann, whose contribution is one of the movie's greatest achievements.
If it hadn't been for Bernard Herrmann, there never would have been a North by Northwest. Benny Herrmann introduced me to Hitchcock. That's how it all came about. Just think of that.
MGM's publicity department created an elaborate press package for the movie, Madison Avenue's biggest firms were hired to create designs for the film's one-sheet poster, including these intriguing hopefuls. But it was this sketch that captured MGM's attention and eventually became one of the original posters. Later, foreign release posters brought forth stunning results as well. Just like today, there were promotional tie-ins. For instance, a Mercedes-Benz that appeared in the film was advertised in connection with the premiere. There was even a North by Northwest coloring contest, accompanied by a book that included drawings of Carrie running from the biplane and of me hanging off Mount Rushmore. But the best advertising weapon MGM had was in using the film's director in the original trailer.
Have you planned your vacation yet? You've a choice between sand and sunburn, or mountain climbing and the Charlie horse. I find it all very enervating, but we should all have some kind of holiday. So, my suggestion is a quiet little tour, say about 2,000 miles. I have just made a motion picture, North by Northwest, to show you some of these delights. I promise you nothing but entertainment, a vacation from all your problems, as it was for me.
For the North by Northwest world premiere in Chicago, Hitch was taking no chances with the safety of his brainchild. Then later, we made an appearance at the movie's first public showing. Although a little nervous, I think Hitch really enjoyed the adulation. And finally, we went in and the picture started. And we got a taste of what audiences have done ever since. They loved every minute of it. This led up to the biggest event of all, the premiere at Radio City Music Hall, which was a spectacle unto itself, boasting a live stage show included in the price of admission.
Oh, it was a big hit.
At the end of 1959, North by Northwest had earned a substantial profit and made it to every top 10 list in the country. The film was nominated for 5 Oscars, though it lost in every category.
North by Northwest was not the classic that it has become. It kind of hung in there, and it would be re-released, and it would be shown at festivals, and it slowly became a famous picture.
Oh, I think North by Northwest is very high as one of his best pictures. I just saw it a few weeks ago. I never tire of seeing it. It's always new, it's fresh.
A lot of people say it's a quintessential Hitchcock film because it has a lot of pieces from a lot of The Wrong Man, 39 Steps.
What he was able to do was to take a small boy's fear of the dark and make it into a wonderful film.
Right after that, of course, he went away from that big, rich-looking movie and went into a black and white period. The next picture was Psycho.
North by Northwest is a film that has stood the test of time. Hitchcock's incomparable direction, Ernest Lehman's rock-solid script, and Cary Grant's finest performance still casts a spell of greatness, which I'm incredibly proud to have been part of. I'm Eve Kendall, Eva Marie Saint, and thank you for watching.